Instead of a flowery entry, I will just read Andy Staples' bio to you from The Athletic. Andy Staples covers college football and all barbecue-related issues for The Athletic. It's a fair summation. Not a bad bio at all. He's also one of the guys that is must-read in terms of college football. He and Ross Dellinger, for my money, do as good a job as anybody that's out there. We're going to visit with both of them today. Andy, nice to catch up with you in the off-season. I hope life is well.
Oh, definitely. Life is great, and I can be the opening act for Ross Dellinger. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's like an hour and a half in between you two guys, so it's not like you're going back-to-back.
That's okay. There was a time when Guns N' Roses opened for Metallica or vice versa, and, it all worked out.
It all worked out. You wrote about Florida recently. That is your alma mater. The offseason during the collective time was chaotic. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but that's the word I will use with the.
I think you're underselling it.
Yeah, Jaden Rashada. So Florida has pressed the reset button in terms of a collective. Explain to us what's going on now in Gainesville and whether or not they're finally going to get it right.
Oh, I don't know if they're going to get it right or not, because that actually depends on their ability to raise money, and then there's still the piece of it where you've got to convince the players to come to Florida for football reasons and make sure you pick the right players and then give them deals. But it is a lot more organized than what they were dealing with before, where it felt like they had a few different groups and the groups weren't always on the same page. And like the Jaden Rashada thing came about because basically you had somebody say, okay, I'm going to back this deal financially, but do the paperwork through a different collective. And so the other collective does the paperwork. For whatever reason, nobody bothered to say, wait, our name's on this. Perhaps we might be considered financially liable for this if the other person doesn't come through with the money. And so that's basically what happened is you had somebody say, I realized I said I was going to do this, but no, I ain't paying that. And then the Gator Collective, which was the one that had written the contract for Jaden Rashada, was like, we're not paying that. So they voided the deal. Fortunately for them, they had a lot of stuff written in the contract that allowed them to get out of it without actually paying any money. And so, but you had this incredibly embarrassing experience for Florida where it looked like they were trying to pay $13 million over 4 years to a quarterback that, the big dogs didn't even really want. Like, it was not good for them. So flash forward to now, and this is something that they've been working on something different, but I think the Jaden Rashada thing pressed fast forward on it. And so they come out with, they're calling it Florida Victorious. The name doesn't really matter. They all these things have weird names, but it is built a little bit more like almost like an athletic department booster club. You've got a former development person who had worked at Florida in the booster club as a fundraiser and then gone on to Georgia Southern and Colorado State in a similar role. And then you got, a more kind of advanced corporate structure. You've got the former right-hand man of Scott Strickland, the Florida athletic director, who's now working with the collective. So that probably means there's a little more communication with the athletic department where, like the Jaden Rashada thing, I doubt Billy Napier, the coach at Florida, knew the financial terms of that deal, because I think if he had beforehand, he would have been like, please don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't put me in this situation. So better communication could help. Is it going to work? I have no idea, because just as I've talked with people who run collectives at various schools, all of them come back with the same thing. I've got to convince my donors that they got to do this every year, that this is not a one-time and now you've endowed it and it's just going to spit out interest that you pay off of. That's not how it works. It's like the athletic department. They're going to keep hitting you up. And you need a good relationship between the athletic department and the collective. Otherwise, you start competing over the same dollars, and then that becomes a problem too.
Yeah. It's like if you want it endowed, somebody's going to have to write a check for $100 million and hope for an 8% return, and now you got,
exactly
big money to work with on an annual basis. But I don't really think anybody's writing a check that big. Is this You remember when the story came out that Texas A&M was kind of folding their collective into the athletics department? It was like everybody was going to sit back and wait and see how this was viewed by the NCAA, and I don't feel like we've heard much about that since.
Well, the NCAA sent them a letter saying, "Hey, you sure you want to do this?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're pretty sure we want to do this." But thus far, I haven't seen any deals get written on that. Where basically now it's unique with Texas A&M because the 12th Man Foundation is their booster club, and it is a completely separate entity from the athletic department. Like nobody who works there works in the athletic department. The athletic department contracts the 12th Man Foundation to sell football tickets, which is how they get $90+ million in revenue. Now, some of that is fundraising as well, but some of that is football tickets. And so they kind of act as a pass-through for the athletic department on that front, which they believe allows them to act as a separate entity and say, hey, we're just going to hire these athletes to promote us. But so far we haven't seen any deals through that. Arkansas has a somewhat similar setup, but there's another degree of separation there. And the thing Florida's trying to do, very similar to the thing Arkansas is doing.
It's a fascinating time, and it changes a little bit seemingly every couple of weeks. Visiting with Andy Staples, writes at The Athletic, covers college football and lots of other things like food. I'm curious about Hugh Freeze at Auburn because reading quotes and reading between the lines, I feel like he has already ruffled the feathers of some other coaches. And I continue to see...
He never does that.
Yeah, I know. A little surprised to see Zach Arnett take a not-so-veiled shot at him. But Lane Kiffin, I'm fascinated by the fact that he continues to bring up the Auburn situation, whether it's in his interview with Alex Scarborough or in social media settings or other places. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Lane Kiffin is continuing to mention the Auburn situation from last year? That
for the same reason that Lane mentions Texas A&M all the time. Lane likes to keep his rivals on their toes. Lane likes to keep the people he has to recruit against on their toes. He's gonna needle a little bit, and he's had quite a few comments about Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. He's had a few about Alabama. Now, those are almost all complimentary toward Nick Saban. But he's always bringing up other schools, probably a lot more than most coaches do, which I think is just kind of part of his personality and part of the way he does business. But, you know, with Ole Miss, with Auburn, I think you view Hugh Freeze as a guy you're going to recruit against quite a bit. So you might want to throw a little shade that way, so that you're, when people look at it and they say, okay. And then Zach Arnett talking about the spring game thing. I had a group of 5 coach text me the same thing when I wrote a column off what Freeze said, because I agree with Freeze. I think they should be allowed to play other teams in spring games if they want to. But you know, I do understand that it is a way to tamper probably a little more accurately, or at least, you know, get a cheat sheet for your tampering. But that acts like tampering doesn't exist, hasn't been going on for 150 years, and is ever going to stop. Because we all know if they actually cared about tampering, they would make very strict rules against it and would enforce those rules. But they don't, because all the coaches want to be able to tamper.
And everybody does to some degree.
Yeah, you have to. There's really, especially in this environment with transfer portal the way it is, you can't do anything without tampering. You have to tamper a little bit, or you're never going to be able to get anybody out of the portal.
Yeah. Andy, always appreciate your insight, appreciate your time on this Wednesday afternoon in April, and look forward to catching up.